So, President Gabriel Boric of Chile is in India. He's meeting with Prime Minister Narendra Modi as we speak. A meeting, of course, between India's Prime Minister and a very significant leader from Latin America. It's part of this massive outreach that we've seen in recent years between India and Latin America. We're here today to just sit down with you, explain what exactly is going on, why exactly Gabriel Boric, the president of Chile, is in India, why Chile matters to India. It's not a country we think about too much, but it is a relationship that is important to India, and where this is all coming from. As an old beat reporter always explained to me, what is important in when you think about India's foreign policy is that no visit, no meeting that involves, of course, India's prime minister and another world leader is without its key strategic significance. There is strategic significance in a number of international commitments that India takes on and relationships that it has. And the Chile relationship, although we don't think about it too much, is also important. So let's get into why it's important. We'll start with, of course, just a little bit of the background to this meeting. Gabriel Boric is, of course, a very young, very dynamic politician. He was elected president of Chile at a very young age. He remains one of the youngest world leaders at this point in time. He, of course, remains a left-wing figure, but he's here, of course, in India to pursue the expansion of a trade agreement that Chile has with India. The two countries signed a preferential trade agreement in 2006, but Chile wants to do more business with India. India wants to do more business with Chile, and there's going to be an expansion of the trade agreement between India and Chile that is on the radar, and I'll explain why that matters in just a moment. There's, of course, a history of cooperation between India and Chile as well. Chile sent a representative to India's independence celebrations all the way back in 1947. There was also a close relationship between Salvador Allende, who was the socialist president of Chile, and Indira Gandhi a very long time ago. In fact, something that I can tell you anecdotally from just readings is that when Salvador Allende was assassinated, he was overthrown in a coup that was in fact sponsored by the American Central Intelligence Agency. Indira Gandhi, India's prime minister, was so disturbed by what had happened to a fellow left-leaning leader in a democratic country that she was, for a very long time, suspicious of the CIA, the Central Intelligence Agency, and thought that they might, in fact, try to overthrow her as well. So this is an interesting tidbit of history when it comes to the India-Chile relationship. Another key thing that we should all keep our eyes out for is critical minerals, metals, technology that the two countries are going to be talking about today. We've seen a lot of reports in the last couple of months talking about how India is looking at sending its companies to mine there, to extract some natural resources that India will need for its own economic development journey. Remember that Chile is absolutely crucial because of its reserves of lithium, which has become absolutely important, whether you're talking about electronic EV batteries, whether you're talking about a host of other industries, renewables, so on and so forth, which are all industries that India would like to develop substantially within its own borders. It needs resources from across the world, and Chile has some of the largest reserves of lithium occurring anywhere in the world. We also know that copper is something that is supposed to be on the agenda between India and Chile. India has already started sending some of its mining companies to Latin America, in fact to Argentina, for example, to sit down, figure out whether there is in fact some possibility for Indian companies to go there, for Indian companies to invest, and for Indian companies to extract natural resources that it needs for that India needs for its own economic development. So that's the immediate agenda between India and Chile that you're going to see moving forward in this meeting between Prime Minister Modi and President Gabriel Boric. But what is the larger narrative? Because again, this is not a relationship we think about too much. Chile generally, and of course Chile specifically, but also Latin America more generally, is not a part of the world that Indians think about too much. It isn't necessarily in our minds critical when it comes to our foreign policy, but actually it's a relationship that has accelerated a great deal over the last couple of decades. Just about 20 years ago, India's trade with Latin America as a whole was fairly minimal. There's been almost a 20x increase in India's trade with Latin America over the last 20 years. That's a massive explosion in trade. Of course, it's not comparable necessarily to what has happened to China's trade with Latin America, but nonetheless, it is important. A number of Indian companies, especially in the automotive sector, sell a great deal of their wares to Latin American countries. It's an important market for them. Latin American countries have been trying to get more Indian pharmaceutical companies, automotive companies to come and manufacture within their borders. So that has been an important part of the conversation, something that's been driving a lot of the trade relationship. It's also a area of the world that Prime Minister Modi and especially External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar have focused on a lot over the last couple of years. In fact, S. Jaishankar has embarked on several visits to this part of the world. He's visited Paraguay, he's visited Panama, he's visited Argentina, he's visited Brazil, and a number, not just the important massive countries that we think about when we think about Latin America, which is Brazil, but a number of the smaller countries as well, including Central American nations. And he's very interested in this part of the world because he believes it is this undiscovered territory that India has not done enough to develop over just the last couple of decades. But now that this is something that has become a personal initiative of India, especially under Foreign Minister Jaishankar as well as Prime Minister Narendra Modi. In fact, a number of new Indian embassies have actually been opened in Latin America. Of course, there were missions that were going to be that India has broadly expanded its missions around the world, but especially in Latin America and Central America, it has greatly expanded its diplomatic footprint as well over just the last couple of years. So that has become an important part of the India's outreach to these parts of the world, because it wants to bring more of these places into place strategically. You also know that Latin America is a part of the world where it is, of course, normally you would assume in America's sphere of influence, because they're of course very close to America. But what we've seen is that China has become an increasingly important player here. China is in many cases the largest trading partner for a lot of these countries. India has seen this development over the last couple of years, and in fact decades. Now Latin America may not be necessarily hugely strategically consequential for India, but the economic importance exists. That's why India is looking to expand those free trade agreements. It's looking to build a lot of those relationships. It does not want to leave any stone unturned when it comes to this particular relationship. So that's where we are right now at this point in time with our relationship with Latin America. Significant untapped potential, which is why External Affairs Minister Jaishankar has been going there so much. I could also talk about energy, which has been a particularly important part of India's foreign policy over the last couple of years. You know, Indian companies like ONGC Videsh, Bharat Petroleum have tied up with a lot of countries in Latin America. Petrobras from Brazil comes to mind very, very quickly. And there are a number of countries with which India wants to sign these long-term agreements where it can diversify where it gets its energy from, because it does not want to be dependent on just a couple of countries. So energy is an important part of the equation. Critical minerals is an important part of the equation. Trade is an important part of the equation, especially when it comes to technology and trade, when it comes to the issue of renewables. So this is a key segment that has not been tackled as much. And again, that explains why India has opened many of its new diplomatic missions there, why External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar has visited the region several times over just the last 3 to 4 years. It is, again, an untapped market that India wants to do more with, and that's why you have this visit by Gabriel Boric, the president of Chile, to India, just another in a string of visits from India to the region, as well as from the region to India, to discuss what more can be done between India and Latin America as the years go on, how Latin America can become an increasingly important part of India's foreign policy, which it hasn't been really considering over the last couple of decades. That's all we have for you right now. We wanted to give you a very, very brief sense of what is on the agenda for Prime Minister Modi and President Gabriel Boric, but also why Latin America matters so much in the context of India's foreign policy. Thank you so much for joining us here on India Today Global. This visit by Gabriel Boric will play out over the next couple of days, and we will keep you absolutely updated on the news from that.